The Golden Vine, a luxury restaurant nestled in the heart of the city, had an atmosphere of quiet opulence. Soft jazz music played in the background as guests murmured in hushed tones, savoring their meals under warm, golden lighting. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The waitstaff moved with precision, practiced in the art of grace and professionalism. Among them was Sophia Green, a young black woman in her mid-20s, dressed in a crisp white shirt and black apron. She was one of the few black faces in the sea of uniformed workers. It wasn't an easy job, grueling shifts, demanding customers, and endless complaints. But Sophia had always carried herself with a quiet pride. She greeted each customer with a smile, no matter how many times she'd heard the same tired insults from those who didn't think much of her work. It was all part of the job, she'd learned. As she made her rounds, her eyes fell upon a man sitting at a corner table. Charles Hawthorne, a distinguished middle-aged businessman in a tailored suit, was sitting alone. He looked up from his phone as she approached, giving her only the briefest of glances. His posture was rigid, his eyes cold, dismissing her before she even spoke. "Good evening, sir," Sophia said, her voice steady. "What can I get for you?" Charles didn't make eye contact. Instead, he waved his hand dismissively, as though she were a mere inconvenience. "Whiskey. Neat. Don't take too long." Sophia nodded, noting his order before turning to walk away. She could already feel the weight of his disregard. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered someone like him, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. Back at the bar, Sophia carefully poured the whiskey into a glass, the amber liquid reflecting the light above. She took a deep breath, composing herself before returning to Charles's table. She could feel the eyes of the other patrons on her as she walked, but she kept her focus straight ahead. As she arrived at the table, Charles was speaking to his colleague, clearly lost in their conversation. Sophia set the glass down carefully in front of him, her movements measured and professional. "Your whiskey, sir," she said, a polite smile on her lips. Charles barely looked up. He gave a small grunt in acknowledgement, but didn't seem to care enough to thank her. The entire moment felt like an exercise in patience, and yet Sophia stood there, waiting for him to say something, anything that might show a shred of respect. But there was nothing. He was already back to his conversation with his colleague, oblivious to her presence. The restaurant hummed with chatter, but Sophia couldn't shake the sense of discomfort that had settled in her stomach. As she moved past Charles's table to attend to another group, she overheard him mutter something under his breath, loud enough for her to catch. "What's this place come to? I swear, they'll hire anyone these days." The words hit her like a slap, sharp and cold. She didn't stop to react, though. Sophia had been in this position countless times before. She had learned to keep her head down, not to engage, not to give them the satisfaction of a response. But inside, her blood boiled. It was hard not to let the sting of his words get to her. She had worked so hard to get here, to earn her place among the servers, and yet in the blink of an eye, she was reduced to her skin color in his eyes. Later that evening, the restaurant grew busier, and the pressure of the dinner rush was mounting. Sophia had a handful of tasks to complete. She had already served several tables, but Charles kept catching her eye from across the room. She could feel his gaze lingering on her as she moved between tables. She arrived at Charles's table again, this time to check if he needed anything else. The room was alive with noise, yet it felt like the air had thickened when she approached him. "Everything all right, sir?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. Charles didn't even look at her. Instead, he glanced at her from the corner of his eye and spoke, his words dripping with condescension. "Everything's fine," he said with a sneer. "Though, I can't help but wonder, do they always hire people like you for these jobs?" Sophia felt a chill run through her, but she quickly suppressed it, clenching her fists at her sides. "Is there anything else I can get for you, sir?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. She wanted to say something, to tell him that she was just as deserving of respect as anyone else in this restaurant. But she didn't. She had learned long ago that words didn't matter to people like him. The evening dragged on. Sophia worked tirelessly, doing her best to ignore the small barbs Charles kept throwing her way. As she served another table, she heard him laugh with his colleague, his voice carrying through the restaurant. "I'm sure she's just happy to be here," he said, his tone mocking. "A job's a job, right?" The laughter wasn't directed at her directly, but it felt like a blow to the chest nonetheless. She gritted her teeth, forced a smile, and moved on to her next task. At this point, it was clear to her. This wasn't just about service. It wasn't even about the food or the drink. Charles wasn't treating her like a human being at all. To him, she was nothing more than an inconvenience. A body to serve his whims, nothing more. By the time Sophia returned to Charles's table, she was exhausted, the weight of the evening's insults heavy on her shoulders. She had just served another table when she saw Charles raise his hand in the air, signaling for her attention. She walked over, prepared to face whatever condescending comment he had next. "About time," he muttered as she approached. "I'll tell you one thing, you're really slow for someone who gets paid to serve drinks." Sophia placed his drink in front of him, her movements deliberate. But before she could say a word, Charles suddenly slammed the glass down with a force that sent whiskey splashing across the table and onto Sophia. The cold liquid soaked her blouse and splattered her face, drenching her. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The chatter of the restaurant faded into a muffled background. Sophia froze in shock, her heart pounding. Charles looked up at her, a smug smile playing on his lips. "There. That's better." The silence that followed felt deafening. Sophia rushed to the back of the restaurant, trembling. She could feel the warmth of the whiskey still clinging to her skin, mixing with the anger that surged inside her. She didn't know what to do, didn't know what to say. She just wanted to escape. In the break room, Maya, another waitress, rushed over to her, her face filled with concern. "Oh my God, Sophia. Are you okay?" Maya asked, her voice a whisper. "What happened?" Sophia blinked rapidly, trying to keep the tears at bay. "I can't believe it. He threw it at me." The shock and humiliation were sinking in. Maya wrapped an arm around Sophia, guiding her to sit down. David, the manager, entered the room, looking uncomfortable. "Sophia, you need to clean up. We can't afford to lose customers like him." His words were like a punch to the gut, and Sophia didn't know how to respond. Alone in the back room, Sophia wiped her face, her fingers shaking. She glanced at herself in the small mirror on the wall. The woman staring back at her looked foreign. It was as though she didn't even recognize herself anymore. Could she keep going like this? Could she keep taking this abuse, pretending it didn't matter? In that moment, she felt the weight of something bigger than her. Something systemic. Something unspoken but ever-present. The idea that people like Charles could continue to treat her this way without consequence was something she wasn't sure she could stomach for much longer. Would she stand up for herself? Or would she continue to take it, just to keep her job? The hustle of the restaurant continued, though for Sophia, the world felt as though it had slowed to a crawl. The pungent sting of whiskey still lingered on her skin, mixing with the bitter taste of humiliation. She could feel David's eyes on her as he approached from behind, his footsteps echoing through the narrow kitchen corridor. His presence only intensified the weight of the situation. David was a middle-aged man, graying at the temples, who'd worked his way up from a line cook to become manager. He wasn't particularly liked, but he wasn't exactly disliked either. He was a business-first type, always more concerned with the bottom line than the welfare of his employees. Still, Sophia had never expected him to respond to the situation like this. "Sophia," David called, his voice lacking any real concern. "You need to clean up and get back to work. We can't afford to lose customers like him." Sophia turned slowly to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel a lump in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She had been on her feet for hours, exhausted. Yet the adrenaline rushing through her made her feel awake, alert. David was still waiting for a response, his eyes slightly narrowed. I just need a moment," Sophia said, trying to keep her voice steady. But David didn't seem to understand. "You don't have the luxury of time, Sophia," he said, his tone even more impatient now. "Go clean up, You can't let something like this get to you. You're a professional. You know the drill. As he turned to leave, Sophia stood frozen in place, her jaw clenched. She had heard this kind of talk before. Work was work, and your personal feelings didn't matter. Not here. Not with people like David and Charles. But deep inside, a quiet rage began to stir. Was that it? Was that all she could expect? A simple get over it? Sophia slipped into the break room, closing the door behind her to escape the noise. The bright fluorescent lights flickered above her, and for a moment, she just stood there in the quiet, staring at the reflection of herself in the mirror. Her hair, still damp from the whiskey, clung to her face. She didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. She needed to talk to someone who would understand. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number she knew by heart. Her mother, Gloria. The phone rang, and after a few moments, her mother's voice crackled through the speaker. "Hey, baby, how's it going?" Gloria asked, her voice soft with the warmth of home. Sophia sighed deeply. I don't know, Mom. Something happened tonight. I'm not sure what to do." Her voice wavered, and for the first time in a while, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable. Gloria's voice turned serious immediately. "What happened, sweetheart?" Sophia hesitated, then spoke in a rush, the words tumbling out like water from a dam. "A customer? He threw his drink at me. He humiliated me in front of everyone. And the manager? He just told me to clean up and get back to work. Like it was nothing." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, Sophia thought the call had dropped. But then her mother spoke, her voice strong, filled with the quiet power that Sophia had always admired. "Baby," Gloria said, her words measured and firm, "you don't have to take that from anyone. Not him, not the manager, and certainly not that place. You don't owe them anything." Sophia felt her breath catch in her throat. "But I need this job, Mom. What if I lose it? I don't have anything else." "Listen to me, Sophia," her mother continued, her voice even firmer now. "You've worked hard for everything you've got. You didn't get to this point by sitting quietly and letting people walk all over you. You don't owe anyone an apology for being who you are." Sophia closed her eyes, trying to absorb her mother's words. It felt like a dam inside her was starting to break. "I just don't know what to do, Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm scared." "Fear's natural," Gloria said, her voice softening, "but it can't run your life. You're stronger than you think. If you choose to stay quiet, that's your choice. But if you decide to stand up, I'll be right here, holding your hand." After the call ended, Sophia felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She had always looked up to her mother, admired the strength and resilience in her. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to speak up. Maya, the other waitress who had been so kind to her earlier, found Sophia in the break room, her face filled with concern. "You okay?" Maya asked, a touch of genuine worry in her voice. Sophia nodded, though her insides were in turmoil. "I don't know, Maya. I don't know if I can just let it go. The way he treated me, and the way David reacted. I don't know if I can keep doing this." Maya sat down beside her. "You don't have to. You know that, right? You can stand up for yourself. People like Charles, they think they can get away with anything. But they can't. Not if we call them out on it." Sophia shook her head, unsure. "I'm afraid of what might happen if I do. What if I lose my job? What if they make my life harder here?" Maya took a deep breath. "I get it. But there are ways to fight back without throwing your job away. You could talk to HR, or, hell, you could even take it to social media. People are paying attention to these kinds of things now. You're not alone." As the evening wore on, Sophia found herself back on the floor. The familiar faces, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of quiet conversations. It all felt like a distant hum in her ears. She was going through the motions, but her mind kept returning to what had happened earlier that night. When she passed David, she couldn't help but glance at him, but his eyes slid past hers as if she didn't even exist. He didn't look at her with any more concern than he had before. He wasn't going to help her, not in any meaningful way. And in that moment, Sophia understood that he wouldn't. He wasn't on her side. Not really. During a quick break, Sophia sat on the edge of the kitchen counter, trying to center herself. Ryan, a fellow waiter who had been working at the Golden Vine for years, came up to her. He had always been friendly, though he had his own way of dealing with the system. "You know, you don't have to take their crap, Sophia," Ryan said quietly, looking over his shoulder to make sure no one was around. "We all deal with it, but you deserve better than this." Sophia looked up, meeting his eyes. "But what if speaking up makes things worse? I've got bills to pay." Ryan smiled, though it wasn't a reassuring smile. "Sometimes, fighting back doesn't mean quitting. It means making sure they understand that you won't tolerate it anymore. People respect that." The night seemed to stretch on endlessly, but in the quiet moments between serving drinks, Sophia made a decision. She was tired. Tired of being silent. Tired of letting people like Charles walk all over her. She couldn't do it anymore. Sophia didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that she couldn't keep allowing this to happen. She had to speak up. That night, when her shift ended, Sophia walked up to David. "I'm reporting this," she said firmly. "What happened tonight isn't acceptable. I want to file a formal complaint." David raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. But this time, Sophia didn't back down. She had made up her mind. That night, when she finally arrived home, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone in her hands. She could feel the tension building up inside her. Her fingers hovered over her phone screen, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to take the next step. But she had to. There was no turning back now. She took a deep breath, then began to type out the email to HR. As Sophia hit send on the email, a strange sense of relief washed over her. She didn't know what would come next, but she felt lighter. She had stood up for herself. Tomorrow would be a new day, and whatever happened, Sophia knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't let anyone diminish her worth again. The next morning, Sophia was back at the Golden Vine, though it felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, and a nervous energy buzzed in her chest. She had submitted her formal complaint about Charles Hawthorne's behavior, and now she was waiting to meet with Karen Foster, the restaurant's HR manager. Sophia arrived at the small, windowless office, her palms clammy as she knocked on the door. Inside, Karen was seated at her desk, her glasses perched on her nose, looking down at a stack of papers. "Come in, Sophia," Karen said, her voice soft but firm. "I got your email." Sophia stepped into the room, her heart pounding in her chest. Karen gestured for her to sit. "Take a seat. Let's go over everything." Sophia sat down, trying to maintain her composure, though she could feel her nerves creeping up. Karen folded her hands in front of her and leaned forward slightly. "So, I've reviewed your complaint, and I've spoken with David and the kitchen staff who were present when the incident occurred." Sophia stiffened slightly. "And?" Karen looked at her with a measured expression. "It's clear from the statements I've gathered that this was unprofessional behavior. Charles has been known for acting in a way that some would describe as entitled. But this, throwing his drink at you, is a violation of our conduct policy." Sophia exhaled, not realizing until then that she had been holding her breath. "So, what happens next?" Karen paused, her gaze thoughtful. "We're going to have a conversation with him, and we'll also take appropriate disciplinary action. Rest assured, Sophia, we take incidents like this seriously." A few hours later, Sophia was called to the office once again. But this time it wasn't for a meeting with HR. Karen had arranged to sit down with Charles as well. The room felt tense as Charles entered. He was impeccably dressed, as usual, his demeanor calm but with an edge of defiance. He didn't look at Sophia as he took the seat across from her. "Sophia," Karen began, "we've called you in today to discuss the incident from last night." Charles interrupted, his voice smooth but with an undertone of irritation. "I don't know what the problem is here. I barely even remember the incident. It was just a joke, you know?" Sophia couldn't keep quiet. "A joke? You threw a drink at me, Charles. You humiliated me. How is that a joke?" His eyes narrowed as if he hadn't expected her to speak up. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's just a little bit of whiskey." Karen leaned forward, her voice cold. "Charles, We've received complaints about your behavior before, but this goes beyond the pale. We won't tolerate any kind of harassment, whether it's physical or verbal. Your actions last night were not just inappropriate, they were illegal. Sophia clenched her fists under the table, her pulse racing. She wanted to lash out, to say so much more, but she had learned over the years to keep her composure. She wouldn't let him see her rattle. An hour later, Sophia was back in the break room, the weight of the conversation still hanging in the air. Maya found her there, giving her a questioning look. "So?" Maya asked, sitting down next to her. "What happened?" Sophia shook her head slowly, still processing everything. He tried to downplay it, like it was no big deal. But Karen really laid it out for him. They're going to suspend him for the night and put him on probation for the next month. They're serious about this. Maya smiled, her eyes bright with pride. "That's awesome, Sophia. You did the right thing. I'm proud of you." Sophia looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly. But there was a sense of relief, too. "I was so scared, Maya. I thought nothing would happen. But maybe people will start taking this seriously now." Maya reached over and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "People will listen. You showed them you won't let them get away with it anymore." Word about the incident spread quickly throughout the staff. Some of the employees were supportive, offering their congratulations to Sophia for standing up for herself. Others, however, were less sympathetic. A few of them, particularly the older wait staff, whispered in corners, questioning whether Sophia had overreacted. But none of that mattered anymore. Later that evening, as Sophia walked into the kitchen to grab a drink of water, she overheard a conversation between Ryan and another waiter. "Man, I heard about what happened with Sophia and Charles last night. She's got guts, huh?" one of them said. "I think it's more than that," Ryan replied, his voice quiet but resolute. "What she did, that was something we all needed to see. Someone had to stand up to people like him. She made a difference." Sophia paused, hearing the words settle into her chest. She wasn't just standing up for herself. She was setting an example for others, too. As the evening wound down, Sophia found herself back in the break room again, sitting by herself. She had just finished serving her last table for the night. It had been a long day, but there was a strange peace that had settled in her heart. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages. There were texts from her mother, her friends, even a few of her co-workers offering their support. As she looked through them, she felt a wave of gratitude. She wasn't alone in this fight. There was still so much to be done. But Sophia knew one thing for sure. She had made the first step. She had taken control. And even though Charles and others like him might continue to show up at the restaurant, the world was beginning to change, and so was she. The next day, as Sophia walked into the Golden Vine for her shift, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. She held her head high, her posture straighter, her confidence grounded in the knowledge that she had done what was right. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. Charles was gone for the night, and Sophia didn't know if he'd be back after his suspension. But it didn't matter. She had stood up for herself, and no matter what happened next, she knew that she had earned the respect of her co-workers. As she walked through the restaurant, Sophia noticed a few of her colleagues nodding at her, their eyes filled with a new sense of respect. It was subtle, but it was there. It felt different, like something had shifted in the air. She could feel the shift too, inside herself. There was no going back now. She had learned how to stand tall, how to speak her truth, and how to fight for the dignity she deserved. Later that week, Sophia received a message from Maya, a group text sent to the entire staff. It was a simple message, but one that carried a powerful message of support and solidarity. Maya's message: "Hey all, let's make sure we stand together. We won't tolerate harassment or mistreatment. Let's make this a place where we can all feel respected. Sophia, thank you for leading the way." The message was shared by others, and for the first time, Sophia felt a deep sense of belonging. They were all in this together, and together, they could make a change. Sophia stepped out of the restaurant that night, her feet light, her heart full. There was still work to be done, but she had taken the first step, and that was enough for now. As she walked down the street, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement. She couldn't help but smile. The world hadn't changed overnight, but Sophia knew that she had. And that was the beginning of something new. A week had passed since the confrontation with Charles and the meeting with HR. Sophia had hoped for some semblance of peace after the initial storm, but as the days wore on, she began to feel the subtle tremors of something beneath the surface, a tension among the staff. One afternoon, as she was cleaning a table, she overheard Allison, one of the senior waitresses, whispering to another employee near the bar. "Did you hear about Sophia? She really went and reported Charles. I mean, sure, what he did wasn't right, but now look at what it's doing to the vibe here. Everyone's walking on eggshells." Sophia froze. It wasn't the first time she had heard something like this. A few of the older employees, particularly those who had been at the Golden Vine for years, were not pleased with her actions. To them, standing up to a customer, no matter how much they might deserve it, was a breach of the unspoken restaurant code. The next few days felt increasingly isolating. During breaks, employees who used to chat with her now kept their distance, their conversations halting when she entered the room. No one had overtly said anything to her face, but the coldness was unmistakable. That afternoon, David called Sophia into his office again. She walked in cautiously, knowing that this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. David leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together. He wasn't smiling, and there was a tension in the air. "Sophia," he began, his voice measured but flat, "I've been getting some complaints from the staff. A few people feel that your actions have caused unnecessary drama. You're making things difficult around here." Sophia blinked, taken aback. "What kind of complaints? I did what I had to do." Charles crossed a line. David sighed, clearly not interested in debating the matter. "I get that. But you have to understand, Sophia, not everyone sees it the way you do. This isn't just about you and Charles anymore. It's about the team. You've got people here who are uncomfortable with the tension you've brought into the workplace." Sophia felt a wave of frustration rush through her, but she kept her voice even. "So you're telling me I should just let people mistreat me so it doesn't upset the team?" David's eyes narrowed. "No, that's not what I'm saying. But you need to learn how to pick your battles. Sometimes, you let things slide to keep the peace. Not everything needs to be addressed right away." For the first time, Sophia felt truly dismissed. The conversation felt like a reprimand, an attempt to silence her. She stood up, her back straight, her voice resolute. "David, I did what I thought was right. I'm not going to apologize for standing up for myself. But if you think I've caused a problem here, I can leave." David stared at her, the silence stretching uncomfortably between them. Finally, he spoke, his tone quieter. "Just think about it. I'm not asking you to back down, but we need to keep things running smoothly." Later that evening, Sophia sat down with Maya in the staff room, the weight of David's words still pressing on her chest. Maya could tell something was wrong, and she didn't wait long to ask. "What happened? You look like you just lost a fight." Sophia laughed bitterly, running a hand through her hair. "It's like I'm the bad guy now. I stood up for myself, and now it's like I'm causing all this trouble. David basically told me I should have just let it go." Maya's expression softened. "That's bull. You did the right thing, Sophia. David doesn't get it. He's always been about keeping things quiet and under control, even if it means ignoring real problems." "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Sophia admitted, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "It's not just Charles anymore. It feels like the whole place is turning against me." Maya gave her a reassuring smile. "You can't let them silence you. You showed them you're not afraid to stand up. And maybe it's uncomfortable now, but you're making them see that things need to change. Don't back down because of a few whispers. This is bigger than all of them." At the end of her shift, Sophia sat in her car, staring at the road ahead, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She needed to talk to someone who knew her, who could give her perspective. She picked up her phone and dialed her mother. The phone rang for a few moments before Gloria answered. "Hey, baby. How's work today?" Sophia sighed. "It's been rough, Mom. I'm really struggling. It's like no one here is on my side anymore. Charles got suspended, But now people are turning on me. It feels like I'm the one who's in trouble." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Gloria spoke, her voice warm and steady. "You did the right thing, sweetheart. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but standing up for yourself is never going to be easy. People don't like when things are shaken up, especially when it forces them to look at things they'd rather ignore." Sophia leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. "I'm so tired, Mom. I don't want to be the one causing problems, but I don't want to let people walk all over me either. Sometimes, doing the right thing means you lose people along the way," Gloria said. "But the right people will stay. And the ones who don't, they weren't your people to begin with." The next day, as Sophia was waiting on a table near the bar, she caught sight of something that gave her a spark of hope. Ryan, the waiter she'd had a brief conversation with earlier, had been making small talk with a few of the newer employees when he looked over at her. His expression was open, not cold like the others. He gave her a nod of acknowledgement, and though it was subtle, it was enough. It was a sign that some people were still on her side, still understood why she had done what she did. Later, when the shift was over, Ryan pulled her aside as she was getting ready to leave. "Hey, Sophia, I just wanted to let you know, I got your back. I know it's rough right now, but you did the right thing. Some of us noticed, and we're with you." For a brief moment, Sophia felt a sense of relief. It wasn't much, but it was something. The feeling of solidarity, even from just a few people, made all the difference. A few days later, Sophia received a surprise phone call from Karen in HR. It was a follow-up to her original complaint. Karen sounded serious, but her tone was not as cold as it had been in the meeting with Charles. "Sophia, I wanted to update you on the situation," she began. "We've had further discussions with the staff. It's clear that there's been some discomfort and division, but it's also clear that we need to do more to address the broader issues of workplace behavior." Sophia listened closely, waiting for more details. "We've decided to implement some changes, including sensitivity training for the entire staff. We'll also be reviewing our customer service policies to make sure our employees aren't put in compromising positions again." Sophia's heart skipped. This was what she had been hoping for, a concrete step toward real change. "That sounds like a good start." "It's just the beginning," Karen replied. "We appreciate your patience through all this, and we want to make sure you feel supported moving forward." A week later, Sophia felt something had shifted. The tension among her co-workers was still there, but it was starting to break. The sensitivity training had been conducted, and it seemed like people were starting to understand the gravity of the situation. While there were still a few whispers, the majority of the staff was beginning to accept the reality that things had to change. For Sophia, it was a bittersweet victory. She had lost some of the friends she had worked with for years, but she had gained something even more important: her voice, her integrity, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to fight for what was right. One evening, as Sophia walked home from work, she felt a calmness she hadn't known in weeks. The city was alive around her, the lights glistening, the sounds of the street blending into a peaceful hum. She thought of her future, of what came next. She didn't know all the answers yet, but she knew she had grown stronger. She had started something that could never be undone. And no matter where she went from here, she would carry the lessons of these weeks with her. With a deep breath, Sophia smiled, knowing that her journey was only just beginning. Weeks had passed since the sensitivity training session, and while the tensions at the Golden Vine had slightly eased, things were far from perfect. Sophia was no longer the new girl in the restaurant. She was now part of a group of employees who had taken a stand. Slowly, the atmosphere had shifted. There were fewer awkward silences, and a sense of unity seemed to be taking root among the wait staff. However, not everyone had embraced the change. As Sophia walked through the restaurant, she could feel eyes on her. Some were wary, others were warmer. Maya had been her rock throughout this transition, but Sophia couldn't shake the sense of isolation from the more senior employees, especially Allison and a few of the older waiters, who still gave her icy glances. One evening, after serving a table, she overheard a conversation between Allison and another waiter near the kitchen. "She's got this whole savior complex, you know? Like she's the hero of the story," Allison muttered, her voice dripping with disdain. Sophia didn't respond. She had heard similar remarks before. The bitterness in Allison's tone was unmistakable. There was no love lost. But Sophia had learned to let it roll off her back. It was hard, but she was growing stronger. Later that evening, Sophia caught Ryan in the hallway, cleaning his apron. "Hey, just wanted to check in," he said. "You doing okay?" Sophia smiled at him. "Yeah, I'm managing. You?" He shrugged. "You know how it is. The place is still in a bit of an uproar. But honestly, you did the right thing. And people are starting to realize it." For a fleeting moment, Sophia felt grateful. Some people were starting to see her actions in the right light, and that kept her going. Despite the small victories, Sophia felt the unspoken tension building in the restaurant. The staff had been divided, and while some people were starting to come around, there was still a core group of employees who felt uncomfortable with the changes. It wasn't just about her. This was a deeper issue. Sophia had forced the restaurant to confront uncomfortable truths. People didn't like being forced to change, and many of them still resented her for it. One afternoon, Maya approached her while she was setting a table. "Hey, can we talk for a sec?" "Sure," Sophia said, wiping her hands on her apron. They sat down in the break room, and Maya looked at her with concern. "There's something I think you should know." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "What's up?" "Allison. She's been telling people that you're a troublemaker. She's been spreading rumors about you, saying you're trying to ruin the vibe here." Sophia's jaw tightened. She had known that Allison didn't approve of her, but hearing it out loud was different. She felt a rush of frustration. Why would she say that? "She thinks you're making waves over nothing," Maya said. "She's not the only one, either. A lot of people still don't get why you took such a stand." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "I didn't do it for a drama, Maya. I did it because what Charles did was wrong." "I know," Maya said gently. "But some people, they don't see it that way. They think you've made things uncomfortable for everyone. And I think Allison is trying to make sure people don't side with you too much." Sophia felt a surge of anger, but she took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She had been prepared for resistance, but it still stung. "I just want to be respected. I didn't start this to make enemies." Maya gave her a sympathetic look. "I know you didn't, but it's going to take time. Not everyone's going to get on board right away. You just have to keep doing your thing." It was just past midnight when Sophia found herself serving a late-night table. Her shift was almost over, and she was looking forward to going home when the door opened and in walked none other than Charles Hawthorne. The room fell quiet for a moment. His eyes scanned the restaurant, and for a brief second, their gazes met. The anger from the incident still burned deep within her. She wanted to walk over and confront him, but she held back. It wasn't the time. He made his way to a table in the corner, a smug expression on his face. It was clear he hadn't learned anything from his suspension. Sophia approached his table with professionalism, but the tension in the air was palpable. Charles didn't even acknowledge her as he ordered his drink. When she brought his wine, he gave her a long, measuring look. "Good to see you back, Sophia," he said with a smirk. "You still upset about that drink I threw?" Sophia's hands clenched into fists, but she forced herself to smile. "I'm just here to do my job, Charles." "You're lucky to still have one," he retorted, his voice dripping with arrogance. Sophia held her ground, keeping her composure. "I'm not the one who should be worried about my job," she said coolly. "And I'm not the one who threw a drink at someone." There was a brief silence before Charles chuckled darkly. "You think I'm worried? Please. This place is beneath me. But enjoy your little victory while it lasts." Sophia walked away, her heart racing, but she felt a sense of power. She hadn't let him intimidate her. The old Charles would have made her shrink back, but not anymore. She was no longer afraid of him. A few days later, Sophia was called into David's office again. This time, there was no reprimand, only a sense of quiet urgency. "Sophia, I need to talk to you about something," he began, not looking up from his desk. She sat down, bracing herself for whatever was coming. "What's going on?" "It's about Charles," David said, finally looking up at her. "He's been filing complaints about you." Sophia's blood ran cold. "Complaints? About what?" He says you're harassing him, that you're treating him unfairly because of the incident. Sophia almost laughed in disbelief. He's the one who threw a drink at me, and now he's the victim? I'm just telling you what he's claiming, David said, his voice more serious now. I need you to be careful. We've talked to him, but I want to make sure you don't escalate things. Sophia's mind was spinning. How had Charles turned the situation around? So you're telling me I need to stay quiet while he gets away with everything? I'm not saying that, David said quickly. But I need you to be strategic here. We can't afford another public issue. Sophia took a deep breath. It was clear that Charles was still trying to manipulate the situation, but she wouldn't let him win. I'm not going to back down, she said firmly. I'll do whatever it takes, but I'm not the one in the wrong here. David gave her a long look, then sighed. I understand. Just be careful. That night, as Sophia sat in the break room, she felt a storm brewing inside her. She had fought for herself once, but now it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had silently stood by, too afraid to speak out. She knew that if she didn't take a stand now, if she let Charles continue to twist the story, things would never change. She needed to confront him, and this time, it wouldn't just be about protecting herself. It would be about protecting everyone else. Sophia looked up at Maya, who had been quietly observing her. I need to do something, Sophia said, her voice low but resolute. What do you mean? Maya asked, concern flickering in her eyes. I'm not letting him walk all over me anymore. I'm going to make sure he doesn't get away with this. Maya nodded, her expression fierce. I'm with you, no matter what. The next evening, after Sophia had finished her shift, she made her way to David's office. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what would come next, but she knew one thing. She had to take control. She knocked on the door. The next evening, Sophia stood outside David's office, her heart pounding in her chest. She had decided that enough was enough. Charles's complaints had gone too far, and if she didn't step up now, the manipulation would continue unchecked. This wasn't just about standing up for herself anymore. It was about reclaiming the truth and preventing Charles from tarnishing her reputation. She knocked on the door, and David's voice called out from the other side. Come in. When she entered, David was sitting behind his desk, his eyes glancing up briefly before returning to the paperwork in front of him. He didn't seem surprised to see her, but there was a coolness in his expression. Sophia had prepared herself for this. Sophia, what can I do for you? David asked, his voice clipped, as though he already knew what she was about to say. I need to talk about Charles, she said, her voice firm. His complaints aren't valid. I'm not harassing him. He's trying to twist this whole thing around. You can't let him get away with it. David sighed, clearly tired of the subject. We've already talked to him, Sophia. He's just upset about the suspension, and he's trying to manipulate the situation. But you need to understand, we can't let this become a bigger issue than it already is. Sophia stood her ground, unyielding. I'm not the one who made this a bigger issue. He threw a drink at me in front of customers, and now he's trying to cover it up by accusing me of harassment. You know that's not the truth. David paused, his fingers drumming on the desk. I know, but the reality is, Charles is a paying customer, and you're an employee. We need to manage this carefully. The last thing we want is a public scandal. Sophia took a deep breath, fighting the urge to snap. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing on her, but she knew she had to stay calm. I don't care about Charles being a customer. What he did was wrong, and it's not going to stop me from defending myself. If you're not going to do anything about it, then I will. David's eyes flickered with frustration. You really want to escalate this? I don't see how it can get any worse, Sophia said, her voice steady. Either you back me up, or I'll take this to the next level. I'm not going to let him ruin my career. There was a long pause. Finally, David exhaled, pushing himself away from the desk. He looked at her seriously, his tone no longer dismissive but thoughtful. I'll speak to Charles again. But you need to know, this could get complicated. You're not just dealing with him anymore. There are other people in this restaurant who will side with him. Sophia didn't hesitate. Then I'll deal with them too. I'm not going anywhere. Over the next few days, Sophia felt the consequences of her decision. The atmosphere at the Golden Vines shifted once more. It was no longer about the incident with Charles. It was about the divide between employees. The old guard, led by Allison, rallied together, their resentment toward Sophia growing with each passing day. Whispers filled the break room. The clinking of glasses at the bar was colder than usual, and the air seemed charged with a quiet animosity. One evening, as Sophia served a table near the bar, she caught sight of Allison and Ryan talking in hushed tones. Their heads turned quickly when they saw her, but the look on Allison's face told Sophia everything she needed to know. Allison was trying to rally support, and she was succeeding. That night, after her shift, Ryan found Sophia in the break room, his face serious. "We need to talk." "About what?" Sophia asked, though she already had a feeling she knew where this was going. "It's getting out of hand," Ryan said quietly, glancing toward the door to make sure no one was listening. "Allison and the others, they're really pushing for you to be taken off the floor. They're making it seem like you're the problem." Sophia's chest tightened. "What are you saying? They're trying to get me fired?" "It's not that simple," Ryan said, "but they're putting a lot of pressure on David, and I don't think he's in a position to make a stand. If it keeps going like this, they'll start spreading it to the customers. And you know how that can go." Sophia clenched her fists, the weight of the situation settling over her. It was happening exactly as she feared. The fight she was trying to avoid was becoming a full-blown war. She felt cornered, but she wasn't backing down. "I'll deal with it, Ryan. I'm not letting them push me out." "I know you're strong," Ryan said, his voice quiet but sincere. "But just be careful. This is getting ugly." By the end of the week, David called Sophia into his office once again. This time, he didn't look frustrated. Instead, he looked defeated. "I've spoken to Charles again," David said, looking at her with a somber expression. "And I've also spoken to the rest of the team. The staff has been making it very clear that they want a resolution. They're asking for you to either apologize or be removed from the floor." Sophia's heart sank. "Apologize for what? For standing up for myself?" David rubbed his forehead. "It's not that simple, Sophia. There's a lot of pressure coming from the staff, and I'm afraid that if we don't resolve this, we could lose customers. You know how this business works." Sophia's face flushed with anger, but she kept her voice steady. "So, you're telling me that because of Charles and a few people who don't like me, I should apologize for something I didn't do? That's what you're asking me?" David hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'm asking you to consider the bigger picture. I want to keep this place running smoothly. We can't afford a public issue." Sophia felt a wave of frustration and disbelief. "So I'm supposed to be quiet? I'm supposed to let this man get away with what he did? What happened to standing up for what's right?" "I'm not asking you to back down forever," David said, his voice almost pleading. "But just for now. Apologize, keep things calm, and we can figure this out." The silence in the room was heavy. Sophia felt the weight of the decision pressing on her, and for a moment, she thought she might just walk away, leave this place behind. But then something inside her clicked. She couldn't let them control her. "Not like this. I won't apologize for something that isn't my fault," she said quietly but firmly. "And I'm not backing down. You want a resolution? Then you'll have to do it without me." The next evening, Sophia walked onto the floor, her resolve stronger than ever. She knew the cost of standing up for herself, but she also knew that what was right couldn't always be convenient. She wasn't going to back down. Not anymore. As she walked past the bar, she saw Allison and a few of the older waitstaff whispering, their eyes glancing over at her. But this time, she didn't flinch. She didn't shrink back. She walked with her head held high, focusing on the customers, on the job she loved. Then, she spotted Charles again. He was seated at a table near the back, laughing with a few of his colleagues. When he saw her, a smirk crossed his face. Sophia met his gaze, holding it for a long moment, the weight of everything they had both been through hanging between them. This time, she didn't look away. She didn't need to. That night, as she finished her shift and walked out of the restaurant, Sophia felt something change. It wasn't just her own sense of resolve. It was the collective energy around her. She wasn't just an employee anymore. She had become a symbol, whether she liked it or not. David had hinted that things were becoming too complicated. But Sophia wasn't the one complicating matters. It was the people who refused to see the truth. The ones who would rather protect their comfort than confront their own biases and wrongdoings. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She wasn't backing down. The days following Sophia's refusal to apologize had been tense. Charles's presence at the restaurant had become a daily reminder of the division within the team, and the staff's frustration was simmering just beneath the surface. Allison, the unofficial leader of the old guard, had intensified her campaign against Sophia, making subtle but cutting remarks every chance she got. The other waitstaff, torn between loyalty to Charles and the realization that Sophia had done the right thing, were no longer speaking openly about their opinions, but their silence felt louder than ever. The atmosphere at the Golden Vine had become increasingly uncomfortable, especially during busy hours when the restaurant was packed with customers. Sophia could feel the weight of every eye in the room, some watching her with barely concealed contempt, others with cautious admiration. One evening, Sophia was setting up a table when Maya approached her, a serious expression on her face. "You need to be careful, Sophia," Maya said, lowering her voice. "Things are starting to spill over." Sophia frowned. "What do you mean?" "Murmurs are spreading. Allison and the others are telling people that you're creating a hostile environment, that you're trying to bring down the whole restaurant with your drama." Sophia's stomach churned. She had expected resistance, but this felt like a full-scale attack on her character. "And you believe them?" "No. But if this keeps going on, it'll be harder to defend you," Maya said, her voice tinged with concern. "You need to decide how far you're willing to go. It's not just about your reputation anymore. It's about the future of this place. If it keeps getting worse, David may have to make a choice." Sophia's breath caught in her chest. The reality of the situation was dawning on her. She wasn't just fighting for her own dignity anymore. She was fighting for the future of the restaurant itself. And she wasn't sure what would happen if she lost. "I won't back down," Sophia said firmly, her voice filled with a new determination. "This isn't just about me. It's about doing what's right." The tipping point came on a busy Friday evening, just as the dinner rush hit full force. Sophia was trying to juggle multiple tables when she saw Charles enter, once again surrounded by a group of colleagues. The sight of him immediately soured her mood. He looked at her with a smug expression, as if he knew exactly what he was doing, but she didn't look away. Sophia had learned to face him, even in the midst of her discomfort. She walked over to his table, keeping her composure, but her heart was beating faster than usual. "Good evening, Charles," she said, setting down the drinks with a practiced smile. "Ah, if it isn't the troublemaker herself," Charles responded with a condescending grin. "Still working here, I see." Sophia's jaw tightened, but she refused to rise to his provocation. "What can I get you tonight?" Before he could respond, Allison appeared from behind the bar, stepping in to take over the table. Sophia looked at her, sensing the underlying tension between them. There was no way Allison was doing this out of kindness. "Oh, I'll take care of this, Sophia," Allison said, her voice icy. Sophia glanced at David, who was standing in the back, observing the situation. It was clear that he was aware of the growing tension. His eyes met hers for a moment, but he didn't intervene. A knot tightened in Sophia's stomach. She wasn't just dealing with Charles anymore. She was being actively undermined by Allison as well. Sophia didn't back down, but the sting of the public dismissal cut deeper than she expected. As she walked away, she caught a glimpse of Allison smirking at the bar, and for a moment, Sophia felt the overwhelming weight of the situation. She couldn't keep fighting this battle alone. The only way to get out of this was to confront the issue head-on, once and for all. The following day, David called Sophia into his office once again. This time, he looked more disheveled, as if he had been running on fumes. There was an air of finality to his expression, and Sophia immediately knew that things had come to a head. "Sit down, Sophia," David said, gesturing to the chair. His voice was heavy, weighed down by the pressure of the situation. She sat, trying to steady her nerves. "What's going on?" "I've been talking to the team," David began. And the situation is escalating faster than I anticipated. Allison and the others are pushing hard for you to be removed from the floor. They say the atmosphere has become untenable, and they're threatening to leave if you stay. Sophia's chest tightened, but she held her ground. So that's it? You're going to let them run this place? David sighed. It's not that simple. I'm trying to mediate. But the longer this goes on, the worse it's getting. The customers are noticing the tension, too. You know how important they are to this business. So you want me to quit? Sophia asked, her voice steady but laced with anger. I don't want you to quit, David said quickly. But we need a resolution. I'm giving you two options. You can either take a step back, apologize to the team, and try to smooth things over. Or we might have to let you go. I'm not sure we can keep this place together if the situation doesn't calm down. Sophia felt a mix of anger and disbelief surge within her. David was offering her an ultimatum, a decision that felt like a slap in the face after everything she had fought for. This wasn't just about her pride. It was about the principles she stood for. You want me to apologize to people who are still protecting the man who threw a drink in my face? She asked, her voice low and controlled. Is that what you're asking me? David rubbed his forehead. I know it's not ideal, but we're running a business here, and we can't afford to lose more customers. I'm not going to back down, Sophia said, standing up. You're asking me to compromise my integrity for the sake of a few people who can't handle the truth. I won't do it. David's expression hardened. Then you're choosing to make this worse. I don't know what else to say. Without another word, Sophia turned and walked out of his office, her heart pounding in her chest. She had made her decision. No matter the cost, she was not going to apologize for standing up for what was right. The next evening, Sophia entered the restaurant for her shift, fully aware that tonight could be the last night she worked at the Golden Vine. The tension in the air was almost unbearable, but she refused to show any signs of weakness. As she made her way through the restaurant, she noticed that Allison was speaking to David near the bar. Their conversation looked intense, but Sophia refused to be drawn into it. She had one goal: to finish her shift with professionalism and dignity, regardless of what happened next. Around midnight, Charles arrived again, taking his usual seat in the corner. He didn't even look up as Sophia walked toward him, his arrogant smirk still plastered on his face. This time, instead of avoiding him or letting him provoke her, Sophia walked up to the table and met his gaze head-on. She didn't flinch or back down. "Good evening, Charles," she said, setting down the drinks with a smile. "I hope you're enjoying your night." Charles looked up, his eyes narrowing as he took in her unflinching stance. "Still pretending to be the hero, huh?" "No, just doing my job," Sophia replied, her voice calm but resolute. "And I'll keep doing it, whether you like it or not." There was a long silence between them, and for the first time, Sophia saw something in Charles's eyes, something that looked almost like uncertainty. The night dragged on, but Sophia kept her focus. At the end of her shift, she took off her apron and walked to the back to retrieve her things. She was about to head out when David came to find her, his face tense. "I know what you're trying to do, Sophia," he said, his voice low. "But this isn't going to work." "I'm not trying to make it work," Sophia said. "I'm trying to do what's right." David paused for a moment, then sighed. "I respect your decision, but you've left me with no choice. You're done here." As he turned to walk away, Sophia felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over her. She knew this was the end of one chapter, but it was also the beginning of something new. No matter what happened next, she had stood up for herself, and that was something no one could take from her. The day after Sophia's departure from the Golden Vine, the reality of her decision set in. She had been removed from the job she had worked so hard for, a place that had once felt like a second home. But she didn't feel the sting of failure that she expected. Instead, she felt an odd sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of the fact that she had stood up for what was right, even if it cost her. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Text from old coworkers, some expressing concern, others with support. Maya was the first to reach out. "Maya, I can't believe they did that to you. You did the right thing, though. I'm proud of you." Sophia smiled at the message, feeling the warmth of Maya's words. Even though it felt like she had lost a battle, she knew she hadn't lost her integrity. As the day passed, however, Sophia began to realize that there was something more important than the injustice she had suffered. She had a voice, and that voice needed to be heard. No matter how small or insignificant she once thought her impact might be, it had created ripples in ways she had never imagined. Later that afternoon, Sophia decided to take a walk through the city. The world outside her personal struggles was still moving forward, oblivious to her pain. As she walked, her mind drifted toward her next steps. She wasn't going to stay idle. This experience had given her something that went beyond any job, a fire within her that refused to be extinguished. By the end of the week, Sophia had already begun researching new career opportunities. She had no intention of returning to the restaurant industry, not after everything that had happened. But her passion for advocacy, equality, and creating positive change had only grown stronger. It was time to look beyond the walls of the Golden Vine and into the larger world of hospitality, diversity, and corporate responsibility. Sophia started crafting her resume and working on a portfolio that highlighted her values: integrity, leadership, and a commitment to fairness. She wanted to find a company that aligned with her principles, one that wasn't afraid to confront its problems head-on. But it wasn't just about finding a job. It was about setting an example. Sophia knew that her story wasn't just her own. It was a reflection of the countless individuals who had endured similar injustices but hadn't had the courage to speak out. She wanted to be that voice, the one that broke the silence. A few weeks later, Sophia was sitting in a sleek office building in the heart of downtown. The name of the company on the wall behind her was Harbor Hospitality, a progressive restaurant group that championed diversity and inclusion. She had done her research, and everything about the company felt like a perfect fit. Her interview with Jennifer, the CEO of Harbor Hospitality, was going smoothly. They were discussing her previous experiences, but the conversation had turned into something deeper. Jennifer leaned forward, studying Sophia's face. "I can tell that you've been through some challenges. It's clear that you have a strong sense of what's right and wrong, and that you don't shy away from difficult situations. Can you tell me about a time when you had to stand up for your beliefs in a professional setting?" Sophia took a deep breath. This was her moment, the chance to finally articulate the story she had been carrying for so long. The moment she had turned the page, with conviction, Sophia began to speak. She didn't sugarcoat the events. She didn't hide the hurt she had felt, but she spoke with pride about how she had stood up to Charles, how she had refused to apologize for something she didn't do, and how, in the end, her refusal to back down had led to her departure from the Golden Vine. "What I learned from that experience," she said, her voice steady, "is that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always necessary. We have to be willing to speak out, even when it's uncomfortable. And when we do, we can inspire others to do the same." Jennifer was silent for a moment, her eyes reflecting a mixture of respect and understanding. Finally, she smiled. "You're exactly what we need," Jennifer said. "We've been looking for someone like you, a leader who knows how to stand up, not just for themselves, but for others. I think you'll fit right in here." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. The validation she had been craving was finally here. She had found a place where her values mattered. She had found her new home. A month later, Sophia was sitting at the head of a conference table, her nameplate proudly displayed in front of her. She had been hired as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Harbor Hospitality, and her role was already beginning to make an impact. The company had been undergoing a massive transformation, and Sophia was spearheading a new initiative to make the workplace more inclusive for employees of all backgrounds. She was working directly with senior leadership to create policies that encouraged transparency, fairness, and accountability. She was also leading workshops and training sessions for staff on issues like unconscious bias, workplace harassment, and creating a culture of respect. But it wasn't just about the work. It was about the people. One afternoon, as Sophia sat in her office, she received an email from a former colleague at the Golden Vine. It was from Ryan, the bartender who had stood by her side when things got tough. He had heard about her new position and wrote a brief message of congratulations. "Ryan, I've been following your journey, Sophia. I just wanted to say how proud I am of you for standing up for what's right. You've inspired me more than you know. I hope we get to work together again someday." Sophia smiled as she read the message, the words bringing back memories of the struggle, the fights, and the victories. It was clear that her actions had rippled out to others in ways she had never anticipated. Months passed, and Sophia's work at Harbor Hospitality continued to grow. Her efforts were beginning to shape a new company culture, one that celebrated diversity and held people accountable for their actions. Charles's behavior at the Golden Vine was nothing but a distant memory, but the lessons she had learned from that experience had fueled the fire that now burned within her. One afternoon, she sat in a meeting with the leadership team, reviewing the company's diversity goals for the year. As she spoke, Sophia realized something profound. She had turned a painful chapter of her life into something meaningful. Her voice, once silenced by fear and shame, had become a beacon for others to follow. She looked around the table at her colleagues, who were all engaged and listening to her ideas. Sophia felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. She wasn't just part of the team, she was helping to lead it. As the meeting ended and people began to file out, Jennifer lingered behind, a smile on her face. "You've done great things here, Sophia. I can't imagine this place without you now." Sophia smiled, feeling a sense of pride and satisfaction. "Thank you. It's been a journey." As the years went by, Sophia continued to grow in her role, influencing not just the company but the wider industry. She became a sought-after speaker, traveling to conferences and sharing her story of resilience and empowerment. Her influence extended beyond the walls of Harbor Hospitality. She became an advocate for workplace equality, challenging others in the hospitality industry to do better. Her work was not just about policies and procedures, it was about changing hearts and minds. One evening, as she spoke at a conference about her journey, Sophia realized something. The pain she had once felt, the injustice she had suffered, had led her to this moment of purpose. She had found her place, not just in the workforce, but in the world. And her journey wasn't over yet. The battle she had fought in the halls of the Golden Vine had been just the beginning. Now, she was helping to shape a future where fairness and respect were not just ideals, but the foundation of every workplace.